Yep.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
Got it. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, because again, a lot of energy committee folks and they were interested. Yeah, so just hi everyone. I see a lot of people I don't know on this call, but I'm currently the AmeriCorps member at BCRC, but starting in September, I'm going to be the regional planner / energy coordinator at BCRC. And I'm working with Jim and organizing a electric vehicle event that's going to be on September 25th, Saturday. And we're going to have it with the at the Bennington District Courthouse around the same time as the farmers market to kind of capitalize on that audience, so to speak. And yeah, we're hoping to have a lot of different electric vehicle models there for people to check out and learn about, and as well as maybe some e-bikes there as well. So it should be a good event.
And I was just going to ask, Carl, do you still have something planned in Manchester too?
Saturday, the 25th, around 12:30, we're going to have the same concept, having quite a few people with electric cars, e-bikes, lawnmowers, leaf blowers, weed whackers, all show up at the rec center right near the pool house, and the people can look at the cars, talk with the drivers, and get a sense of what it's like to own electric vehicles or e-bikes. So, interesting coincidence. It's the same day.
Awesome. It's E-Day, I guess, September 25th.
So thanks for the ability to shout out about it.
Well, I really wish I could be there, because I got an e-bike a few years ago, and one of my favorite things to do is to let people try it and then convince them to buy one. I think I've sold about 15 e-bikes, and I'm thinking about I should just open up a big e-bike shop or something. That would probably be really fun, but it's a lot of fun seeing people's expressions when they take off on one of those things. So anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Dan, who has a presentation for us about EV charging stations. And I'm going to allow, okay, so you should be able to share your screen, Dan.
Okay, so I usually use Teams, so I just have to figure out how to do that. Share screen, pretty straightforward. And there it is. Okay, so I'm Dan Dutcher. I'm the Environmental Policy Manager at VTrans. Happy to be here talking to you all. It's a pretty small group, so it's fine by me if you want to ask questions along the way. I think I got about, 18 slides, so not too much. We go. And all right, so I'm going to talk about electric vehicle charging, some of the current and planned state policies and programs, and maybe some opportunities for local participation. The way I have things set up right now, I can't see any of you, so if you have questions, someone's going to have to shout out, I guess. There's also, quite a bit that municipalities can do, at the local level through zoning and other policies. And I'm not going to get into that today. It's kind of a separate subject, but I did send Mark some information from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development on that. And Mark can share this slide deck, which I also sent to him, and also that information on municipal policy, with all of you, if you're interested. So I tend to talk in acronyms a lot, and probably most of you know many of them around vehicle electrification, but just some basics. sometimes we call charging stations, EVSE, electric vehicle supply equipment. Level 1 charging, sometimes it's called trickle charging. That's when you just, plug into your wall outlet. There really isn't any state policy around level 1 charging. We're not really advancing that or supporting it in any way. It's, pretty slow. And as battery sizes increase, you're probably going to be in a pretty desperate situation to use level 1. So it's just really not part of the programming.
Hey, Dan, this is Jim Sullivan. I have a question.
Sure.
It's been troubling me for a couple of years. Why in the world did they decide to call it electric vehicle supply equipment and instead of just charging stations, which everyone knows and understands?
Well, I know.
It seems like a waste of a word that just confuses people.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a reason. I haven't looked into the etymology of that. It's probably because it includes not just the actual station that a consumer would think of, but associated equipment, some of the trenching to get there, things like that. That's my best guess. I don't really know. It does seem jargony, but it is kind of commonly used. So there it is. So we also have level 2 charging. That's what you would be able to arrange through the kind of outlet you'd use for a major appliance like an electrical stove or a clothes dryer. That's what people would typically set up at home. And then there's DC fast charging, also kind of jargony. I think there's an electrical engineering reason for that. And that level 3 is sort of technically not correct, but some people call the fast charging level 3. It doesn't bother me. We talk about EVs, electric vehicles. More accurately, it's PEVs, which are plug-in electric vehicles. And plug-in electric vehicles include both what are called either battery electric vehicles or all electric vehicles, and then also plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. So that's sort of the lowdown on some of the terminology. We don't include conventional hybrid vehicles that don't plug in any kind of state policy programs. That's considered kind of mature conventional technology, and it's not really where we want to go to address our climate and energy goals. So some basic statistics. Vermont's doing pretty well compared to other jurisdictions. We had the highest number of public EV chargers per capita. Technically, that's the number of ports, and that statistic is from the Department of Energy, so it's not the number of charging stations. I don't know if there'd be any difference, but that's just how they measure it by the charging ports or plugs. And that includes both level 1, level 2, and fast charging. We have about 307 charging stations, public charging stations, and that includes about 834 charging outlets or plugs or ports. About 74 of those stations are fast chargers, and some of those stations serve Teslas only. I don't have the exact number. It's a pretty small minority, maybe 20 or 30, something like that. So most of the public charging stations are available to all vehicles. Someday Tesla may flip a switch and make its stations available to everyone, but that hasn't happened yet. And I guess it is like a software issue or system that Tesla uses. So they have a unique plug too, but you couldn't just get an adapter because their charging equipment knows that you don't have a Tesla. We have some at least rough estimates for what kind of EVSC we need in Vermont. The Comprehensive Energy Plan, which is in the process of being updated, currently estimates the need for about 50,000 EVs in Vermont by 2025 to meet our state climate requirements. If you look at US Climate Alliance type metrics and that kind of thing, the number could be as high as 90,000 EVs. We're a long way from that. But according to the Alternative Fuels Data Center from the Department of Energy, that would require 50,000 EVs would require about 1,500 level 2 ports, and only about 760 are currently online, and also 190 fast charging ports compared to about 74 currently. So we do have a ways to go, even though we're at the front of the class on charging ports per capita. We in Vermont, the agencies run a interagency grant program. It's called the EVSE grant program. It has a website. It's an ad hoc group that includes VTrans, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, the Public Service Department, and the Agency of Natural Resources. All the work, policy work, or just about all of it on vehicle electrification is interagency. It's complicated. It requires different areas of expertise, and no one agency actually has the staffing to handle it all on their own. We are having some discussions about how we can approach this challenge a little more systematically. We've been using kind of a patchwork approach, and with kind of extemporaneous type work groups and so forth. And there is some discussion about how we could do this, a little more organized way, but it's hard to know what that would look like. I don't know if we would want sort of an Uber agency, because all these agencies do have separate missions and separate budgets, and I don't know if it would work to have them answer to some other agency. And one of the issues is actually just staffing levels. We did thankfully just hire a new sustainability and innovation project manager. We're very happy to have him on board, but we had to cannibalize a planning position to do that. So this interagency team is managed by ACCD. They were sort of the first out of the gate in funding EVSC in downtowns, and they, I guess, got some long coattails from doing that. So everyone decided they should really take the lead on managing some of these other funds. We started out drawing down VW settlement funds. Those came through ANR. And then we had a couple of very successful grant rounds, and the legislature decided, I guess, that we were doing okay. So they started steering state funds to this interagency group through VTrans, through the yearly transportation bill. And what we've been doing is been relying on public-private partnerships. We fund other organizations, typically requiring some kind of match, and they're then responsible for constructing and operating these charging systems. And I think they have a 7-year requirement for running them. So as I suggested before, we've had numerous grant rounds. In the beginning, the grant rounds were open to multiple applicants. That included municipalities for projects in several different categories. So we set aside various funding limits for downtowns, workplaces, like travel destinations, lodging, And then fast charging along highway corridors. We put a cap on fast charging in these initial rounds because it's much more expensive than level 2, and we didn't want to burn through all the money on a small number of fast charging stations in these early grant rounds. And between the first 2 grant rounds, 30 projects were awarded, using over $1 million to install 75 level 2 chargers and 5 fast chargers across the state. And the funding was way oversubscribed. I don't have the numbers with us, but we had to prioritize all the applications and then draw a line where the funding ran out, and there were way more applicants below the line than above that received funding. So then in rounds 3 and 4, which used state funding, we decided to focus on highway corridor fast charging. We thought that was strategically important to increase consumer confidence and travel and tourism by people driving electric vehicles. And we pulled the maps out of the existing fast charging stations, and we tried to identify gaps, and we looked at things like annual average daily traffic, gateway and destination characteristics of different sites to try to decide where these charging stations should be located. And we used sort of geographic radii that might have been, the circles or polygons, depending how we drew them, could have been a mile or 2 apart. But we did that so we could leave the contractor responsible for identifying particular sites. We thought if we did that, we'd have a lot of legwork to do up front to, try to identify willing landowners, and then the landowners could, drive a hard bargain for the amount they would charge people to use these locations. So we basically, would identify slightly larger locations where we thought these gaps needed to be filled, and then we let the contractor do all the negotiating with the property owners. And that is the hard part of siting these charging stations, and not just for us, but for other people working on this kind of thing. It's doing the land deals. And we have been requiring certain site characteristics, 24/7 access, proximity to the highway. I forgot where we drew the line. It's a mile or 2 or something. They need to be served by amenities, restrooms, preferably someplace to get a bite to eat and so forth. And part of the strategy of locating these charging stations is economic development too. It's not just to give people a place to charge up, but hopefully they'll stop someplace nice, and they'll want to walk around and maybe spend a little money while they're waiting for their cars to charge. At the fast charging stations right now, how long does it take to charge? It depends on how big your battery is. But you could be there for a half hour or something. And the way things are going with the super fast charging stations that are going in sort of 350 kilowatt, if you have a high-end electric vehicle with a big enough battery, that would charge your vehicle 20 miles of range a minute, something like that. So that's 100 miles in 5 minutes, 400 miles in 20 minutes. So, it's approaching a filling station type model, but it's still going to be, I think, a good idea to consider economic development in locating these charging stations. And finally, on the last bullet point on this slide, we needed to be strategic about pairing high and low utilization sites. You know, the object here was geographic equity. We wanted to make charging available all around the state. We actually had a goal of which we've achieved, or will have achieved once things are built, but we've obligated the money so that we'll have a fast charging station within 30 miles of just about every address in Vermont. That was a long-standing strategic objective we came up with at VTrans. And you know, to do that, we had to pair high and low utilization sites. And there have been experiences in other states where they issued requests for proposals and failed because too many of the sites were just going to be too unprofitable. None of them are really, you know, good business right now, even in the more frequently used areas. But you know, the companies are trying to get a foothold in this business with the expectation that electric vehicles will increase and their businesses will increase. But if you just, you know, try to get people, even if you pay for the everything without a match, you're still not going to get companies to take on just a whole slew of low utilization sites. So we tried to pair them up, and you know, we were successful. Thankfully, we weren't sure we would be, but we did get one responsive bid in round 3 for 11 fast chargers from a company called Blink. We started working with Yugo, and then Yugo was swallowed by Blink. And we just did a round 4, and we got another responsive proposal from Blink, and we got another one from a Vermont company called Norwich Solar Technologies, I think. And I think they've been in the solar PV business. They want to branch into this, and we selected Norwich just to sort of diversify the contractors we're working with. And you know, hopefully that'll all work out. We're in contract negotiations with Norwich now. So I think I just covered a bunch of this. You know, it was important to get one applicant because then you compare the good with the bad. So yeah, I think we've covered just about all that. $1.7 million for the 11 sites in round 3. And for some reason, I don't know, say down here in the second bullet, but it was $750,000 for the 6 sites in round 4. So next, grant round 5, the legislature in the 2021 transportation bill authorized $1 million for a pilot program to see if we can set up level 2 at affordable multi-unit dwellings, or MUDs. And this money again is going through this interagency EVSE grant program. And we are now trying to develop just starting on developing the grant conditions. MUDs are very important for state policy and charging support, because a lot of people live in this kind of setting. They don't have the opportunity to set up home chargers the way people would in a single detached dwelling, for example. And as you can imagine, there are all kinds of issues. You have renters and some, but owners and others. But you know, sometimes people have dedicated parking spots, sometimes they don't. It can be hard to you know, connect the metering from the charging port to your particular unit, and sometimes that might not even be the way to go. So there's lots and lots to figure out, and that's going to keep us busy. So future grant rounds, none have been established at this point. Some Volkswagen funding remains, not a lot, maybe $100 and some thousand. Some of that's money we sort of clawed back after some of the proposals we funded, you know, didn't go through. And we're looking at some unknown amount of federal funding in the current version of the federal infrastructure bill. Vermont would stand to get about $21 million over 5 years. So upwards of $4 million a year for electric vehicle charging. And there would be a significant match requirement. It can actually, sometimes be hard to spend money when you have to provide a match, as some of you probably know. But I think the state would probably, commit to matching certainly whatever they could, because we're, sort of serious about building out our charging infrastructure. And there could be restrictions on where the federally funded charging infrastructure could be used. The Federal Highway Administration currently runs a alternative fuel corridor designation program. It doesn't just apply to electric vehicle charging. You can also do it for hydrogen, or in the few places that's available, or compressed natural gas and renewable natural gas. In Vermont, we participated early on. You have to meet certain requirements to have your corridor designated as its alternative corridor ready. You have to have fast charging space so far apart and so close to the highway. But then if you're not quite up to snuff, you can get a designation as alternative corridor pending. And so some years ago, early on, VTrans participated in this. We got all the interstates designated as ready, except I think I-93 north of somewhere around Hartford. And we got that designated as pending. And then we kind of dropped out because the designations didn't really come with funding. It was eventually linked to some potential funding, but you would have to take that funding away from other programs like CMAQ type funding. So it wasn't getting us much. Really, its benefit was more as sort of a planning tool to help link up with charging in neighboring states and provinces. And the feds also allowed signage along these corridors, but we're Vermont, so we didn't want the signage. And we also actually thought the signage could be kind of confusing, because you could label these corridors as electric vehicle corridors. We thought that could imply that if you weren't driving along a corridor, maybe it wasn't convenient to use an electric vehicle. And we didn't want to get that message out. We're trying to get, as I said earlier, ubiquity in charging stations in Vermont. So we bailed out, but then we started getting word, several months ago that the corridor designations could be linked to federal funding. So we got, really busy really fast, and participated in the last round of designations and got some of our US highways designated. So there's still many gaps on these designated corridors. So we'll have no problem spending this federal money even along these major routes. And I think the way the law would probably end up being written as it is right now, once you fill in the gaps on your designated corridors, I think you are allowed to branch out to other areas, but you have to go through some hoops to do that. Workplace charging is kind of important, and it's been underfunded so far. It has been shown to increase electric vehicle uptake. If you can't charge at home, or even if you can, it's pretty handy to just pull into work and plug in. And if there isn't a charger for all the people who want to use it, and there's like a holdover fee for charging, there are apps that can notify you that your car is charged, and that you have so much time to run down and move it. And the other advantage of workplace charging is that it draws down daytime solar. So it helps, kind of distribute loads and that sort of thing. So we've done some planning around building out electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Some years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago or so, VTrans retained Du Bois and King to do a study for us about filling in gaps, and we've pretty much achieved the goals of that study with grant rounds 3 and 4 with the gap filling exercise we went through that I talked about a bit earlier. And also, as I think I mentioned, our interagency EVSE grant program has been doing kind of back of the envelope ad hoc type planning to define funding opportunities. We just pulled the maps out, looked for gaps, maybe considered traffic volumes for where we thought we might need to build redundancy. We'd look at gateway type communities, like we were putting something up in Alberg, for example. It hasn't been a totally scientific approach, although I think we're doing pretty well and being pretty fair. But now there's a goal in the transportation bill that establishes the objective of a fast charger within 5 miles of every interstate interchange. I would certainly hope that we're going to aim for much closer than 5 miles. That's a little bit out of the way. So we will try to do better than that. They also want a fast charger no more than 50 miles apart along all state highways. And they want us to report to them on that. Secretary of Transportation Flynn has said that he'd like to do better than the 50-mile metric and maybe have that and see if we can get a fast charger in 25 miles apart along state highways. This planning objective does not come with funding at this point, but it is out there, and as funding comes from other sources, hopefully that's something to organize around. VTrans is significantly supporting Drive Electric Vermont to undertake a whole bunch of work relating to vehicle electrification, but part of that does include developing an EVSE deployment plan with a 10-year time horizon. What should be the mix of fast charging and level 2? Where should the fast chargers be located? What do we do about utility demand charges in some of these fast charging locations? A demand charge, for those of you not sort of tuned into that, is essentially the cost of having electricity on hand when you need it. So charging stations are kind of a worst case scenario for demand charges, especially right now in these early days, because the charger may sit there most of the time unused, and then someone can pull up with their high-end Tesla and suddenly demand half a Walmart's worth of electricity over a 30-minute time period. And the power company's got to be prepared for that. And for many decades, they've been charging demand charges for that kind of thing. It'd be like in a factory where you're doing all kinds of stuff, and then you only turn the big machinery on, the big conveyor belt, a couple times a month or something like that. It ends up costing you compared to even an organization that uses a lot of electricity, but they're using it all the time. So they end up, being able to, cover the sort of regular cost of that. It goes into the, sort of profit margin of their product, but that's not working right now for demand charges. So, one of the things we need to do is figure out how far can we get with utility policy. Green Mountain Power has already provided demand charge relief, and they cover most of the state. It's possible one of the other utilities may have, not sure about that, but the smaller ones probably won't be able to do that. One option might be on-site battery storage at the fast charging stations. So, you can juice up the battery gradually. Car comes in, charges, draws it down a bit, and then, it charges up. And so then you're not getting those big slugs of demand from the power company. So once again, ahead of myself a bit on utility planning. The utilities now are required to do electric vehicle rate design. They're going to have to offer special rates by the middle of 2024. Demand charges we just talked about. There is a idea that as electric vehicles become more common, it could actually create downward rate pressure. This is a sort of, awesome development if you're in the utility business, because they were seeing declining or sort of holding steady loads as a result of efficiency measures. And, now there's a chance it's likely actually that, well, certain that loads are going to increase significantly. But that might be possible to happen without also increasing fixed costs. And that would happen as a result of, time of use rates and so forth. So you could have your vehicles charging during the wee hours, when there isn't a lot of other demand for electricity, and at other times. And that would allow the power company to serve the charger without increasing fixed costs, and that could end up benefiting the consumer. Right now, I'm not hearing any real concern about headroom on the grid for at least passenger vehicle charging. But as we start getting into medium and heavy duty vehicles, especially the really, sort of long haul trucking and that kind of thing, we're not quite there yet. I don't know how it's going to work out, if it's going to be battery electric or hydrogen. But certainly if we started getting into large vehicles with really big batteries, they might have to do some planning to accommodate that. Weights and measures, it almost, you would think, doesn't deserve its own slide, but all these things get kind of complicated. The Agency of Farms and Market is responsible for all this around the state. They'll, they inspect the gasoline filling stations to make sure you get what you're paying for. And they're going to be responsible for electric vehicle charging stations. They're waiting for guidance from the National Institute of Standards and Technology to be able to really set this up. It's complicated. I can't quite get into it now. But people are working on this. It's possible that the Agency of Ag will need to charge a license or registration fee to help support the program. The governor's opposed to new fees. He's pretty firm on that, but he has said that he, could go along with fees that are essentially a new application of an existing fee. So like highway user charges for electric vehicles, the governor's open to that. So maybe he'll be open to this too. All this is getting worked out. In the 2019 transportation bill, EVSE operators were authorized to sell electricity by the per kilowatt hour. That was ambiguous before, with some concern that only utilities could do that. They still can apply other fees. Holdover fees are important, so people leave when they're done charging. Some of the other ones, like hookup fees, time of use fees, that's really, I didn't write that very well. It's the amount of time you spend charging is what that means. But I think that could make cost comparison difficult for consumers. So some of these things need to be discussed. And VTrans is working on a pilot project to assess roadway user charges for use of the highways by electric vehicles. This is important. We have declining transportation revenues for other reasons, principally vehicle efficiency and also the failure of the federal gas tax to keep up with inflation. But certainly electric vehicles are starting to put a dent in that revenue source, and they will increasingly do so. So we have to deal with this, and the legislature is always very, very concerned with financing, and this has become kind of a diversion. You want to go down and talk about other sort of policy issues, and they're all over this one. So it really is kind of a barrier, another barrier to EV uptake that we need to deal with. We've hired a consultant, and we'll be working on that. And there are a variety of options. I don't want to go down the rat hole here. Some of them, might involve sort of mileage-based user fees. There would be a default for people who don't want to be tracked. So there's issues around that. But one fee under discussion is to add to the per kilowatt hour charges at public electric vehicle charging stations. And that would help capture out-of-state drivers. Currently, about 25% of our gasoline and diesel taxes in Vermont are paid by folks who don't live here. Getting toward the end here, signage. We have a signage policy. Talked a little about signage before. We didn't want the alt fuel corridor signage, but general service and directional signs to EVSE we think are helpful at this point. We think this at VTrans that this is probably temporary. That we're not going to sort of allow this or pay for it forever, but in these early days, especially where we don't have cell service everywhere, this could be helpful. And we have a 3-mile cutoff, so we'll put the sign on a limited access highway if the charging station is 3 miles away, and if the route to the charging station goes along municipal roads, VTrans will pay for the sign if the municipality puts the sign in and maintains it. And we also will install signs at the sort of driveway, along a state highway. If there's a charging station there, there'll be a little sign, MUTCD compliant. It just has a little EV charger symbol and with an arrow, something like that. State highway rights of way. Right now, the state is avoiding entering into the business of owning and operating publicly available EVSE. We're funding it through public-private partnerships, but we don't really, we don't want to be in that business. It's not what we do. We don't want to unfairly compete with the private sector. We are converting the fleet gradually to electric, and that requires putting in EVSE to charge the fleet. And we're talking about how to make that available to employees in the public. And the trick is, setting the appropriate price. Normally, again, not to go on too far of a tangent, the legislature has to approve fees. We got a break from that for fleet EVSE, but that I think sunsets next year. So this is all ongoing. And we are willing to serve as a site host for EVSE, but we have to do some work with Federal Highway on that. I think we just have to jump through some hoops, and we'll be able to allow the private company to charge a fee for the use of the charging station located in the state highway right-of-way, except at interstates. We'd need a change to federal law to do that. There's some debate about, I think there's a lot of people who are saying that change should be made. From my own perspective, Our interstate is kind of, priceless in Vermont. We don't allow commercial activity. I don't really think we need to start. We've managed to, fuel our vehicles by locating gas stations outside the right of way. I think we can do the same thing with charging infrastructure. That remains to be seen. We were offering free level 1 trickle charging at some park and rides, and we were planning to put it into others as we upgraded lighting. But that was getting abused by people who were camping out. So we've discontinued that and we've pulled it out where it was located. So that's what I've got. Hopefully I didn't go on for too long, and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Dan. That was a lot of really good information. Do people have questions?
Yeah, I have a question, if you don't mind, Dan. And your slides, I think, started to get to this, and I think I also have to apologize because I think I've asked you this before, and I think you gave me a really good answer, but I think I need to hear the answer more once to remember. But it seems to me like one of the real barriers for utilization of public charging stations is the way that people are charged for charging, if you will. Like I have a ChargePoint account and an EVgo account, and so I will like have to like plan out my travels so that I have access to the charging stations that I have accounts with. So just for a real world example, I usually use home charging, obviously, or ChargePoint that's available in town in Bennington. So I'm on the road and I'm like, oh, the ChargePoint wasn't available for whatever reason. So I'm going to use my EVgo. So I'll go to the EVgo station. It's been so long since I've used my EVgo account, that the EVgo system or software has changed or something. So my account says it's no longer valid and it doesn't work. Like if people who are driving gas cars ran into this, there'd be like a war breaking out. So it seems like it should be just as easy to pay for electricity as it is for gas. And I know you talked about paying per kilowatt hour, and they can now do that. But it seems like that should just be fundamental. If you go to a charging station, I don't care whose it is, you ought to be able to pay with a debit card or a charge card.
I think you can, at least you're supposed to be able to. And there is an interoperability requirement in Vermont law. So you're supposed to be able to charge, at any public charging station. The trick is that the charging companies can require membership. So, if you had a EVgo account, you might have said, and it's expired, you'll end up paying more. That's
which I wouldn't even necessarily mind so much, just being able to do it. The problem is I get there and like with the EVgo one, I was like, oh, okay, now to pay, I have to like download an app, go through 16 screens to figure out how to use my credit card. It's just like, yeah. No, I just want to stick my damn credit card in the machine and pay and go.
I know, and I'm personally, I'm with you 100% on that. And I can't stand it when I go into the pharmacy and they ask if I'm, a member or whatever, and they're asking other people and they're fumbling and entering, their numbers, and it's an illusory benefit. You just get charged more if you're not, right? So, and then to be a member, you often have to provide all kinds of personal information. So they're basically mining that and threatening to charge you more if you don't provide it. But, like everything else, you can't really make any headway with a lot of argument. And some people are saying that other companies, including gasoline filling stations, require memberships. So why should we require vehicle charging stations not to require memberships? So I'm on your side on that, Jim. But there's some arguments. to
Well, I
be
mean,
had, so.
gasoline charging stations, yeah, you get, if you are a member or whatever, some of these places, you get 5 cents off a gallon. I don't, whatever. Yeah, just for not having to have an account, I'll pay the extra 5 cents a gallon. It's just that it seems like it's either not an option or it's so complicated that it's a significant deterrent. And I'm afraid it's even a deterrent to people getting EVs in the first place, if they think it's going to be that much of a hassle to travel distance.
I know, and you can add that like to your list of 57 passwords, each one with its own requirements and different, expiration dates.
So can I piggyback on that comment from Jim, Dan? I have a Tesla, and you use your phone and you can locate all the different charging stations, and it tells you how many are available at each place. So I'm wondering if VTrans is thinking about coming up with one app for the smartphones that will give you every single charging station in the state and how many ports are available at each one. And like Jim is saying, what do you need to access? Do you have to have an account with EVgo, etc.? It sure would be convenient and boost tourism if there was one app like that for the whole state.
Well, you're a little ahead of us, Carl. When I was talking about weights and measures, one of the things I mentioned is that there would actually by necessity have to be some kind of registration requirement. So the Agency of Agriculture, will know where all the charging stations are. So we will move into a situation where one agency will have all that data. So there has been some discussion about whether we could do something, with that. But I think in order to get, availability and all that, we'd have to get some kind of cooperation from the charging stations, or there'd have to be some kind of mandate. So I think it's a really interesting idea. It would certainly be consumer friendly, but it's not happening anytime soon, I would say.
Dan, this is Mark. Quick question. Is the hardware for electric vehicles universal at this point?
No. First, you have the matter of Tesla. They have their own plug at Tesla charging stations that's not compatible with other vehicles. Although if you own a Tesla, I don't know if they come with adapters or you have to buy the adapter. Carl might know, but
they do come with one. They come with one.
Yeah, okay, so they come with one. So if you have a Tesla, you can plug in at Tesla stations or any other public station. If you don't have a Tesla, you can't use the Tesla station, and it wouldn't work for Walmart or somebody to come up with an adapter because it's also a software issue. If you tried to do that, Tesla's smart enough to know that you're not plugging in a Tesla, and it's possible that someday Elon Musk will just press a button on his computer and all the Tesla stations will be open to everybody. So they haven't done that yet. So, but once you take the Teslas off the table, the plugs are universal for level 2, but they're not for the fast charging or level 3. There's an SAE combo, and there's something called CHAdeMO. And CHAdeMO, I think, was mostly is for the Japanese vehicles and like Nissan, and they might be moving away from that. I'm not sure. It's like, remember us old folks with the videos, what was it, VCR and Betamax or something, and which one was going to win, and something like that. And it looks like the SAE combo is out in front. And it's possible that is part of the federal effort to electrify the fleet, the whole transportation sector, that they will require that all the charging stations move to SAE combo, and that, you know, all the vehicles sold use that kind of plug in the US, but that's still coming along.
Hey, Dan, are the, talking about the multi-unit dwellings, the MUDs or whatever it is that you call, do you know if the regional nonprofit housing organizations are so-called, let's say, plugged into that program? They really know about it?
I think they are. I don't have the legislation open, but I forget how it's written exactly, and I don't want to misspeak, but some of them, I think the Vermont, what's the Vermont organization that does affordable housing? Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, maybe?
Yeah, VHCB, and there's Housing Vermont.
Yeah, they might be eligible to receive grants, because some of the MUDs are owned by them, I think. Obviously, I'm on the early side of the learning curve here, but I think they are eligible to receive grants. I'm not sure about, you know, other like sort of nonprofits yet.
Cool.
You know,
Yeah, I
but
think, yeah, I mean, Housing Vermont, I think, was an equity partner in a lot of those projects. It just, I think that they might be like, you know, some of the more willing multifamily housing owners to participate in the program, but
Yep.
they've been reluctant to jump in, just because most of their, you know, they don't have many, if any, residents. They have EVs, but, you know, part of that's because they don't have a place to charge. You know, it's chicken and the egg. But I
Right.
think if they were really, you know, sold on it, I think that they'd probably be pretty willing to jump in.
Yeah, as I said, it's really early days. The legislation probably wasn't signed, the T-bill probably wasn't signed enacted until June, you know, and it's August, and everyone takes a summer vacation. So we're, and the agency has been busy too with the comprehensive energy plan and climate action plan and all that stuff. But you know, we're just starting to figure this out. Yeah, Catherine asked, limited access highway. Yes, LA highway is limited access highway.
Thank you, Dan. Does anybody have a final question? I promised to end by 4, so. All right, well, thank you very much. And Dan, and I will distribute the information that you sent me to our TAC and to our Energy Committee. And please let us know in the future if there's anything we can do as a regional commission to, you know, help out the expansion of the EV charging station network in the state. So,
well, I appreciate that. You know, with V-Trans, you know, works with the RPCs on a regular basis, and this is a subject we want to keep going. So we will be in touch on that. And anyone's welcome also to reach out to me with any follow-up questions or needs for information at any time.
Great. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And everybody have a good day.